They call this the Land of Stones. It is said that long ago there was a king whose wicked bride brought great rocks from the dark mountain to build altars to evil gods all over the land. As the memories of those shadowy days faded, all that was left were the stone rings which lay buried in the deep forest. Old laws prohibit the planting of crops or the burying of the dead anywhere near these stone rings. Unfortunately, time has veiled many of the circles in vines and thick forest underbrush. Such is how a mortal error was made when the plague struck the small village of Praynot. As is customary, a plague pit was dug in the vicinity of the town where the bodies of the dead would be taken for mass burial. It would not be until the entire village had been decimated and the pit filled that it would be realized that a stone ring lay in the forest, not 20 paces from the communal grave. Our village was nearest Praynot, and the first indication that something dark and capricious was at work came when the following spring a colony of especially large and vicious rats invaded the granary of our town. Not content with feasting on our stored wheat and barley, they took to violating our homes, and soon reports of villagers being bitten in the night while they slept became commonplace. The town rat catcher was soon completely overwhelmed by the influx of vermin, and he put forth to the town council a plan to purchase a large number of cats from several farms in the hill country. To the dismay of the town's elders, the cats were found to be terrified of the enormous interlopers, and the problem remained unsolved. It would soon be revealed, however, that this was but a portent of horrors yet to come, when at night the shuffling forms of strange beings could be seen wandering in the woods and cornfields. It would be a group of hunters who had wandered near the plague pit of Praynot that would first discover the horrid truth in the matter. They found the soil of the mass grave greatly disturbed, and it would be their conclusion that a large number of things had dug their way free from the covering blanket of the soil. They returned to the town with word that the dead of Praynot had arisen. In the olden days, there had been an obscure sect of priests who worshipped the moon as a deity who had been sought after in such matters. However, the moon priests and what knowledge they held has long disappeared from the common world. The only holy men to be found in the current times are representatives of bizarre religions from the western coastlands, where trade cities spawned many ridiculous and outlandish beliefs. In desperation, many young men of the town, including myself, a mere cobbler's son, were sent out to locate at least one cleric capable of battling the horrors of the undead. I was on the road alone for many weeks before I came to the township of Greengate, where, in a local tavern, I was told of just such a priest who was living as a semi-permanent resident in a brothel located in the nearby woods. What kind of priest would make stay in such a den of ill repute? I asked of the innkeeper, a large and flaxen-haired woman.
"Oh, he's quite the odd one," she said as she dried a wine glass on her apron. "I believe he's partial to the goddess they call Orissa the Discordant."
"I've never heard of such a goddess," I expounded.
"Not many folks have, but she has her followers here and there, mostly in little groups which nest on the fair beaches of the southwestern coast. They're a strange lot. The whole faith is a sham, if you ask me, started by gypsies, and impossible for the common folk to fathom. Rest assured he is ordained, and can perform such duties as marriage and burial. In times such as these, we must take what we can get." I pondered her words and reluctantly set off for the House of the Red Blooms to find this priest who wallowed in the sins of flesh. I rode through the city gates and followed the road a mile until I came to a narrow path which appeared near a boulder at the top of the hill to my left. I was nearing dusk, but the summer sun was still lighting the forest as I crossed beneath the heavy green branches of birch and elm which formed an arch over the path.
It had been a rare occasion in my life to travel in the woods so beautiful and bright with green moss growing over every fallen log and stone. My homeland, although covered in woods, is a dark and foreboding place of dangerous crags and ravines crusted with enormous blackwood trees at every turn. I admit that I was quite enjoying my little adventure as I wandered into a vast empty grove where flowers of every imaginable color sprung unbidden from the lush waves of swaying tall wild grass. It was at the far end of this grove where I first spotted 2 large oak trees which had been cut some 12 feet from their root and carved into the likeness of 2 unclad damsels, standing suggestively at each side of the path. I blushed at the sight of their sagacious smiles and extraordinary lurid curves. Here the path was inlaid with stones, in a finer craft than any street I had seen in any town. As I followed these stones up the hill, the sky had begun to darken as I beheld an extravagant mansion at the path's end, perched majestic and fine atop the hill. Here the forest had been subdued, and the ground all around the wondrous villa had been planted with an ever-widening blanket of roses, which stretched out as far as the eye could see. As I drew nearer, I beheld a low stone wall which parted before me at the open gates of a granite archway where there stood 2 massive men armed with brutish and horrid axes, which they held loosely in their dark hands. In the distance, I could hear music and laughter from the door and open windows of the mansion. One of the men held forth his hand and gestured for me to dismount. I did as he bade and stood before him, my eyes coming only up to the bottom of his thick muscled chest. "Name?" he asked, with a low rumbling voice like thunder. "I'm Holton of Darkton," I answered with an embarrassing squeak. "Any weapons must be left with us," he said, pointing to a large table at his side where various swords, knives, and guns were laid in careful piles. I withdrew my musket and handed it carefully over with my powder horn and bag of shot. I also withdrew my boot knife, which he placed on the table, with the rifle together. "Here are the rules of the House of Red Blooms," he pronounced solemnly. "The workers of our establishment are to be treated with the utmost respect unless other terms are agreed upon by said worker. The same goes in respect to the client. All that passes within these walls is held in the strictest confidence of both workers and patrons. Any breach of this confidence will create insult with Our Lady, and she will seek immediate compensation for said breach of conduct. The ladies and men of our house are to be referred to as workers, and any other terminology will be held as a breach of contract, and immediate compensation, again, will be forthcoming. Payment will be divided in halves, the first half being upfront in negotiations of a given event, and the other half to be paid at its close. Are all of these terms understood?" Yes, but I'm not here seeking company of your workers." "Then what is your business at our house?" "I was told that there may be in residence here a certain priest of some foreign goddess." "Any information concerning a patron is held in confidence. If you seek someone within these walls, then you will have to enter and find them yourself. But be warned that any undue harassment of a patron will be held in breach of confidence, and immediate compensation will be required." "Yes, I get the idea." The guard stood aside as the other took my horse to a nearby stable as I continued towards the porch on foot. Upon crossing into the open door, I found myself in a cloakroom which led down a long hallway. As I walked, I noted the air was laden with aromas of wine and perfume, as I saw the warm orange glow of a massive hearth burning somewhere ahead. As I stepped into the light, I was filled with awe at the grand chamber, which sat at the heart of the house itself. In size, it approached the opera houses of some great city, and matched these also in its grandeur. Everywhere there were couches and tables as musicians played from a high balcony, and maidens of excessive beauty and men of matching appeal walked amongst laughing and reveling guests who drank and sang as they flirted, gambled, and indulged in all manner of indecent behaviors. By the huge roaring fireplace there sat a woman dressed in the finery of a queen who watched all that passed around her with cold, calculating scrutiny, and at her side were 4 men who resembled the guards I had met at the gate in size and manner. My entrance did not pass unnoticed, as I was soon approached by a small, dark woman clad only in a long yellow silken cloth, which was wrapped around her bosom and waist like a thin winter scarf. "Hello, do you seek a companion?" Her voice was dripping and sweet like honey as she took my hand into her own delicate fingers. "I was looking for a priest." "Then you have come to a strange place," she laughed as she moved ever closer, her long amber hair flowing over her bare tan shoulders. I know, I chuckled nervously as my eyes betrayed my conscience as I glimpsed the soft curve of her breast beneath the shroud. "I was told that there was a man here who may be of help." "We have men," she said softly like a breeze through the trees in the morning, "if that is what you prefer." No, but truly I am seeking a fellow who may help my township in the east." She laughed and pulled away as her spell was broken like a shattered glass. "Yes, I know who you seek, but you may wish you had chosen me over his company when you meet him." She led me casually through the crowded tables until she came to one that sat apart in the far corner. There I beheld a man dressed in bright crimson robes, with 4 women in a state of complete undress, who laughed as he slurred some rant on a subject I could not hope to comprehend. The numerous wine bottles which stood empty around him indicated that he was most likely in a severe intoxication, as he grinned madly and fondled the women provocatively. "There is someone here to see you, masking," my guide said with mild annoyance. "I'm busy," he shouted as he began placing cards before him on the table in a cross pattern. "It might be important," my host said, and I was eternally grateful for her continued support until my days would end. "Can't you see that I'm trying to tell these girls their fortune?" he cried indignantly. Indeed, as I studied him closely by the light of the candles on the table, I could see by his dark skin and black hair and beard that he may well have been of old gypsy blood. "Be that as it may, you have a tab to pay, and this gentleman may seek to employ you." Her tone was strict and unquailed by his rudeness and indifference. Her words seemed to strike a chord, and he looked up at me with large blue eyes of a singularly strange size and shape. "All right, fortunes will wait then," he slurred, as he waved the other women away with long, thin hands. I averted my gaze as their slight, naked forms stood from the table and disappeared into the crowd. "What do you want?" he said as he gathered the cards and took to sipping from a wine glass. I seated myself across from him and watched as my host left with a weak smile which said to me, "Good luck, you are on your own." "I need a man of divine powers," I said. "I've heard tell that many of the male workers here are divinely endowed," he retorted, chuckling. Anger was rising in my chest as I fought to remain reasonable in the face of the idiot's drunkenness. "Are you or are you not a priest of Arissa, the Discordant?" I said sternly. Yes, I am one of her chosen," he said plainly as he began to shuffle the cards with extraordinary dexterity. "Are you certain? The task which I require aid is one which calls for a man of knowledge of the dark times." "Sir," he said as he nimbly flipped the cards between his fingers, "I have more knowledge than I know what to do with. Now exactly what is your problem? I spend most of my time here healing various diseases which plague workers of such establishments." What do you know of the undead? He stopped, and the amazing dance of cards which was playing in his hands, and he looked upon me with his strange eyes from beneath the cowl of his red robe. I know what they are, and that they are particularly troublesome in many parts of the land of stones. That is the country of my home. Then I feel great sympathy for you. I really cannot fathom why people insist on living in such a wretched place. It is the home of our bloodlines going back for generations. Tradition is highly overrated in my opinion. Can you or can you not tell me? I burst as I slammed my hands flat down on the table, drawing looks from many of those who sat around us. I smiled and apologized as I looked back at the priest who had placed the cards in a single pile before him. Can you or can you not pay me? He hissed like a lake adder. I can, but only upon the destruction of the threat to my village. I function much as the workers of this establishment. I insist on half before I even get started. I can do that, I said as I removed a bag of silver from my belt and dropped it to the table. But be warned, if you cheat me, then it will be considered a breach of confidence, and compensation will be immediately forthcoming, I finished coolly. And so be it, he said as he drained his glass. He stood from the table. I saw that he was a man of remarkable height, and towered over me with a long and gangly frame draped in his outlandish robes. Let us be off to your little horrid nightmare land before I sober up and come to my senses. Mask him, servant of Orissa the Discordant, proved to leave a lot to be desired as a traveling companion. His demeanor alternated between flamboyant periods of excessive lecturing, punctuated by hours of endless brooding silence, and the attempt I made at balancing one with the other seemed to only incite the pendulum of his mood to swing to the opposite extreme with severe intensity. At one particularly painful point of ongoing silence, I relinquished my will to ignore him and attempted a simple conversation. So where are you from? He looked up from beneath his cowl and studied me as if he had just noticed I was present, riding beside the broken ancient mare which was his mount. I am from the southern coasts, he answered. Are you a gypsy? I asked. Why would you think that? He replied with interest, real or feigned I could not gather. You were telling fortunes. I thought that was a tradition of the ancient Harmony tribes. It is, and I am descended from that great line of people, actually only by half of my lineage. My father was a great Harmony leader once upon a time. And what of your mother? I was truly curious as to the past of such a bizarre individual. I fear you would not believe me, he answered, smiling wistfully. His voice was calm and reflective for the first time since I had met him. Why is that? Because she was not human, he sighed. Then what could she be, then? I take it you do not believe the old stories about the fairy people who lived in the East, then? I hardly know any such stories. I heard some when I was a child, but it is not considered respectable to repeat them amongst adults. Then you would hardly know that the reason your dismal little country is such a blight of monstrosity is because the damnable king of it drank the blood of those people which never existed. Pardon, I said, and looked away from the morning sunrise to gaze at him with suspicion. I had realized early on that he took great pleasure in mocking me. There was a king, and he drank the blood of the fairy people so that he could retain his youth. He was a sick vampire who was instrumental in destroying the entire species. Go ahead and pull the other one, I laughed.
Don't be such an incessant fool. That is your own history, you mock.
Once more he fell into a brooding melancholy, and I gave up the remainder of the day for any civilized conversation. It was not until that evening, as we sat by our campfire and ate bread with cheese, that I ventured another talk. So, what kind of goddess warrants a man such as yourself as a representative? I said, chewing the crust of the hard bread. A crazy wench is the kind, he said quietly. If you find your own deity to be mad, then why do you serve her? Because, you ignorant shoemaker, she is real, and she saved me from certain death when I was a ridiculous jester. You were a jester, I balked. I used to enjoy making people laugh, if you can believe that. I told fortunes, stories, and jokes. I quite loved that life until I stumbled into that wretched city of Corspius. The whole diseased city is run by madmen and thieves. I was only there a night before I was made a whipping post for a crime lord named Duno. The bastard robbed me and left me to the most sickening diversions of his men. If Arissa had not come for me then, I would have been a slave to their filth. How did she save you? The way she saves all men. By giving me a choice. What choice was that? Arissa offers men two paths. The path of order and the path of disorder. Choose one, and you may be one of her children. Dally in the middle, and you will be forsaken. That's absurd! Is it? Maybe you're not educated enough in the ways of the world to understand that all falls within those two roads. Well, then I would choose order. What would the world be without laws and justice? You will find that laws and justice have very little to do with order. But otherwise, there's only chaos. Chaos is madness and insanity. Once again, I would tell you that chaos is often more a thing of man's world than nature's. You speak in riddles. Yes, wisdom often sounds like riddles to the unwise. Arriving back in Darkton, we were greeted by cries of joy, and a celebration was soon underway. Tables were set in the center of the town square as food was prepared, and casks of ale opened. In my heart, I doubted that such levity was warranted, as still I had great doubts concerning the validity of Maskim's claim. As the night wore on, I watched as the gluttonous priest ate and drank every flagon and dish offered to him. He was especially fond of pies, and seemed to sample each one that was laid out before him. I had never seen a man eat or drink so much, and I wondered at the comparisons between his bony, thin frame and the enormity of his appetites. In the midst of his guzzling and devouring, I asked him, "What exactly are your plans for the ending of our village's peril?" He looked up from the plate of berry pie and cream, which he was currently shoveling back into his black bearded face, and replied, "It is all very simple, my lad. Even now, the fields and woods surrounding this town are filled with the wandering dead of whom you are troubled. But come morning light, they will return to the pit from whence they have arisen. Safely, in the light of the sun, We and several able-bodied men of your town will make our way to the pit and pour into it as much oil as can be mustered. Then on top, we will create a massive pyre of dead limbs, which we will set ablaze. This inferno will nurture throughout the day and into the night until all is settled down into ash. This ritual we will repeat for 3 days until flame has scorched down into the earth itself and purified the putrid whole, as should have been done as the first bodies were laid there last year. I sat muted and stunned by the simplicity and apparent logic of his plan. So filled with superstitious terror had we been of the pit's inhabitants that we had never dared dream of simply burning the whole while the dead rested. And this will work? Of course! In the dark times, it was well known that the dead may rise from the ground, and bodies were always burned in this part of the world. It befuddles me that so much ignorance has clouded the very practical necessities of the past. We are fools, I said with disgust and shame. As I have been telling you all along, people should not even be living anywhere near those cursed stone rings. The woman who brought them here was nothing more than a witch, and her designs were of the most destructive nature. Why you people insist on living at the doorstep of the altars built for demons will always vex and amaze me. I sat and watched as he continued to feast and enjoy the generosity of the town, which would soon owe him its existence. I pondered how such a greedy, lustful creature as he could come to be possessed of any wisdom at all, but realized dourly and with reluctance that he was indeed knowledgeable beyond anyone I had yet to meet in my own life. The thought filled me with fear and uncertainty, for it indicated that he may well be wise in other matters. And if that were true, then life held more mystery and less stability than I had wont to believe. The burning of the plague pit of Pray Not became a festival in of itself. On the second day, more townsfolk ventured into the wilderness to behold the blaze, and in time tents were erected and songs sung to commemorate this austere occasion. Any dead which might attempt to drag themselves from the blaze were shot at by the townspeople with howls of victory and vengeance until the remains caught ablaze and burned to bone and ash. By sunset on the third day, the pit was naught but a massive crater of gray and black soot smoldering on the forest floor. As the town gathered around and shouted praises to Maskim and Arissa the Discordant, there was noticed a small black hole which was appearing at the very bottom middle point of the pit. After a time, several more of the small holes appeared around the pit, and it was discussed that these were the entrances to the tunnels made by the rats. Maskim listened intently to this talk, and then wandered away to a tree stump, where he sat alone for half of an hour until I dared approach him, weary of the moods which signified his nature. "Why are you so troubled?" I asked as I sat beside him in the tall grass, watching the sun slowly descend over the vast reaching hills of dark sullen trees. "You never mentioned rats," he replied in a low, sad voice. "Well, yes, but we have decreased their numbers substantially, and I would wager they will be extinct by the first snow. Be that as it may, the damage has already been done." "Of what do you speak?" "I heard the elders talking just now. They said that the vermin infested your food and grain, that they bit men, women, and children alike." "Yes, this is true." "And it is obvious that these creatures nested here in that pit." "It would appear so." "Do you not realize that those Those fiends carried the contagion of that doomed town in their very mouths. You mean that we would all carry the plague? None of us have grown ill. Even if you do not grow sick with plague, there is little chance you shall escape the second illness.
The second illness? Stop speaking in these damn riddles!
It is no riddle, my poor lad. His blue eyes were now shadowed with grim sorrow as he turned them to me. Every death will bring another horror. The winter alone will kill many.
Yes, there will be deaths in the winter. There always is.
And each demise will foster the birth of another walking, hungry corpse. My stomach tightened as my hands began to shake.
No, this cannot be true. There must be something which can stop it. You can heal the people of this town before winter.
A curse such as this, a thing born as punishment for deeds committed against the order of nature. There is no curing it.
You selfish, arrogant beast! I shouted as I stood over the red-robed monk in hollow, hopeless fury. What do you know but chaos and wanton desire?
My poor friend, you understand so little.
Oh, I understand that you care nothing for anything but what serves your belly and your prick. You who chose a path of madness over law. Still, you cannot comprehend of what I have told you. Do you not realize that I chose the path of order? There is nothing of nature which is not a part of set boundaries and law. Only the will of men can breed chaos. The taint which has poisoned every acre of this country is but a seed dropped from the tree of a man's corruption. Then what shall we do? How can we fight against this poison?
Live your lives and tend your crops. Go back to your father's little shop and mend broken shoes. Meet a woman and in time marry her. Have your children or have none. There will be those who are afflicted and there will be those who are not. The number of either is impossible to determine. Just remember that whoever dies, for whatever reason, may be subject to this foul and awful condition. So no matter what cause brings death upon them, you must always remember, burn your dead.
Within the days of the following week, I watched as the gluttonous Maskim drank the wine and ate the food of my people. I watched with loathing as he endlessly laughed and jested with the local girls whom he bedded one after another as further payment for the town's salvation. The knowledge which he had imparted to me ate away at me like a festering sore in my heart. Every cursed burst of inane laughter, punctuated by a chorus of the town's girls' giggles, was a rusted dagger twisting in my belly. One night, I found him alone at his table in the tavern, shuffling cards just as he had on the day of our first meeting. I had been drinking heavily, as had become my nightly habit,
and I sauntered to his table with 1,000 hateful words burning in my mind. "Will you tell me my fortune?" I asked with a smile as I attempted to hide the scorn I felt for his very existence. "Why, of course," he answered as he handed me the strange deck and indicated that I was to shuffle them. "You must concentrate on your quandary as you handle the deck," he said with his unusual gleam in his eyes. I could think of nothing but how much the man sickened and repulsed me as I shuffled. After a few turns of the stack, I returned them to their owner, who began placing them carefully one by one in a great wheel around a center card he had me choose from the deck. This circle represents the wheel of fortune, which turns around you. It is also the private universe of which you are the center. The card in the center is a representation of you as you exist at this moment. He flipped the center card, and I saw the image of a young man impaled on a number of swords. I winced at the image. "The Page of Swords," he said naively. "Do you feel threatened, injured, and balanced on the tip of 7 swords?" "I do," I replied with a subtle and revealing implication. He began to flip the cards cautiously and examine each with a studious and practiced scrutiny. "You wish to know if, when you perish, you will rise as one of the undead?" "I do." My voice trembled as I wondered at his ability to guess my thoughts. I surmised that he had learned to read the faces of men well during his years as an entertainer. He eyed me calmly and replied, "You will not." I let forth a sudden audible sigh of relief. "However, every other man, woman, and child in this town shall." I stared into his gleaming blue eyes with horror. "How do you know?" "Orissa speaks to me through these cards. In the time while you were wandering in search of a priest, your fellow townsfolk ate a particularly tainted batch of grain. It seems that your rat catcher had taken to shooting the beasts inside the granary, and their corrupt blood was spilled over all. He told no one, but merely shoveled the oats until they appeared clean." "Then there is no hope." "Who will burn the dead when so many carry the contagion?" "Certainly not one shoemaker. But let us suppose that there were a way. Let us posture that if the one man who would be free of this curse should offer himself as a sacrifice in order to free the rest. What are you suggesting? Would you take this horror on yourself if it meant that the others would be freed?" I was dumbfounded with terror as I contemplated the consequence of what he was saying. "Your soul would be trapped within the shell of a hungry, walking corpse. You would be completely conscious of every action committed by your animated cadaver, but you would be helpless to intervene in the atrocities which it would commit. However, all the rest of your people would be free, and perhaps their mercy would save you in time." What mockery is this? You do not have the power to do such a thing." I stood from the table and gazed with horrified impunity at the monk's sudden, solemn, and passive expression. Thankfully, there were few other patrons at such a late hour, but the owner still cast us both a dubious glance. "You are correct. I do not, but Orissa does." agree to those terms, and all shall be as I have said. But I will be cursed to roam as a monster until I am burned. It seems a small price to pay to maintain the ongoing order of life in this community. You did want to save them, did you not? That was your purpose in bringing me here, wasn't it? Has not your every thought since the day you met me been a series of ongoing litanies concerning my selfishness and wanton behavior? Now is your chance to show me the true nature of self-sacrifice. Reveal to me the error of my ways by giving your own life for the safety and salvation of your people. My mind was a frantic tempest of turmoil and confusion as I tried to reconcile every word of righteousness and goodness I had ever been taught with the agonizing thought of being transformed into a walking, devouring horror. I backed away from the table in the circle of fateful, horrid cards, unable to speak through the conflict of emotions within me. At last I gave in to the greatest of my impulses and ran from the tavern with the laughter of masking ringing cold and clear behind. In the shelter of the woods, I sat by a stream and drank until my brain was a dull fog of delirium and hate. Every burning ember of self-incrimination and guilt was turned hastily and directed at the priest. I wished nothing more than to hear his mockery turned to pleading and cries for mercy as I strangled the life from his throat with my own bare hands. As drunkenness escalated this rage and need for vengeance, my eyes drifted to the pistol which sat in the moonlight at my side. My soul had turned black with fury and desire for murder. I stumbled back towards the town and waited in an alley by some stables as I saw him leaving the tavern. I followed him as he made his way down the street, arm in arm with a local girl, as he mumbled comments which sent her into moronic jags of laughter. She was taking him to a barn, and I watched as they entered. Just as the first rays of dawn were peeking over the tops of the surrounding buildings, I crept into the dark structure with the stank of hay and manure, and I spotted them half undressed and kissing on a blanket thrown over a mound of straw. "That's him!" I shouted as I drew the pistol and aimed. The girl pulled her blouse over her chest and immediately rolled to the side and ran past me in fear as Maskeep sat up and stared at me coldly from the shadows in the dusk. "Oh, the shoemaker comes to reconsider his offer then," he laughed as he laid back and crossed his arms behind his head. "I have come to put an end to your arrogance once and for all, you bastard," I said as I pulled back the hammer with a solid click, and it locked into place, ready to fire. "So be it then. You murder me and curse your entire town with one action. How fitting that it is you who has judged me as arrogant. Stand like a man for your execution," I shouted as a bead of sweat began to trickle down my face. "Yes, I should stand, so you might gain pleasure in watching me fall. Go ahead and fire. You may conceal your cowardice from the others, but you and Orissa will always know the truth. You will watch as your people fall one by one and rise again, rotting and decayed to feed on their kin. Only you will know as you watch the little children weeping as the bodies of their parents are tossed on the pyre, that you could have prevented it all." His words were like hot, molten lead dripping onto my mind, hissing and scorching at my thoughts, my fingers shaking as the urge to squeeze the trigger increased with each passing moment. I had never known hatred as what I felt for this man who had become the embodiment of all things I despised. How dare he
How dare he invade my thoughts and offer me such a bitter cup from which to drink? This foul and broken mirror he had held up with which to see my own hypocrisy and my own lies. I cursed him and his wretched goddess to the depths of the blackest hell. I turned the pistol and pointed it at my own head as I shouted, "Is this what you want for me to die? I cannot live a life in the shadow of this curse. If I am to save them, then let it be now." Maskim walked forward and placed his hand gently over my own and lowered the barrel away from my temple. "I do not seek your death any more than it was I who offered you this agreement."
But what kind of goddess would drive a man to madness?
What sick game does this deity play? I was weeping as Maskim took the gun and, easing the hammer down, placed it in the belt of his trousers. Then, putting both hands on my shoulders, looked into my tear-filled eyes. "She is a treacherous and sadistic thing who delights in watching the conflict and chaos of men's minds."
But why do you serve her then?
"I am no more a servant than a slave, captured by his enemy in a battle, forced to pay reparation. I made my pact with Orissa, and now I continue her work, whether I agree or disagree with her cause and means." I laid beaten and dying at the feet of criminals, and she offered me a choice: vengeance or freedom. She said, "I can take you away and leave you in the forest, where you can go on to lead whatever life you choose. Or I can slay these men, and you can have your revenge." "You chose to be set free." "No, I chose vengeance." I watched as they were torn to pieces by a spectral fiend who rose from the shadows with claws and teeth like razors. My delight was but a fleeting fancy as I saw the horror inflicted upon them. When all was done, I knew, as I stood bathed in the spray of their life's blood, that I would never be free again. If I agree, how long will I have before this curse overtakes me? I truly cannot say. You may live a normal life for decades, or you may be crushed by the wheels of a wagon as you leave this barn. The only certainty is that when your time does come, you will arise as an abomination.
And who will put me to rest? Who will release me when this time comes?
I want you to know that I truly care for you, my young friend. And if it is at all possible, when that time comes, I will lay you to rest. I looked at his face, and for the first time, I saw a depth of humanity and compassion which I had only then witnessed for the first time.
So be it then. Let the curse fall on me.
Maskim
embraced me like a brother and kissed my brow tenderly. With this gesture of compassion, the darkness of my fate was sealed. We left the barn, and in a few days, Masking was gone. I would not see him again for many, many years. If the goddess had cursed my death, then she blessed my life. I met and married a wonderful woman from a neighboring town, and in time, as my business thrived, we filled the rooms of our home with a great many loving and gentle children. We seldom knew sickness and saw little of hardship. And as the winters passed, few of my people died. And when they did, they were laid to a long and peaceful rest, free of nightmares of pray not. In time, I grew to be a very old man with a profusion of grandchildren who delighted me daily with their laughter and joys. I was known for my kindness and generosity, and when finally the ancient body in which I resided began to fail, people from miles around came to pay their respects. I lay on my deathbed, surrounded by my children and relations, as one fair spring morning I drew my last breath. The world and faces of those I loved faded into shadow as I beheld them all with a new and clear hunger. Many gasped with the miracle of my resurrection and rushed to help me from the bed of my demise in hopes of sharing in the miracle. It was only as they saw the dull glaze of alien undeath in my eyes that they backed away. I watched, helpless as the creature I had become prepared to attack my beloved wife, and then I heard a shot ring out. Those who stood in the room of waiting fled as the tall-robed figure entered carrying the pistol he had taken from my own hands so many years ago. His countenance was stern and unaltered by time as he placed the bullet between the eyes of the monster which had just arisen within my corpse. He strode in and grabbed the still writhing cadaver by the leg and dragged it from the room and out into the light of morning. There were cries of alarm and distress, but none dared to impede him on this mission. He dropped the beast, which had been me, on the walkway in front of my home, and reaching into his robe, withdrew a flask, which he poured over the twitching remains of my body. Then stretching out his hands, he said a few words in some forgotten and archaic tongue, which set my newly risen corpse aflame. As I burned, there was only a sense of sublime release as my spirit drifted out and over the village of my birth. I looked down and felt that he saw me as I soared unhindered through the sky above. He had set me free, and I can only hope that someday someone will do the same for him.